Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Ben Fisk for the Darkfall Protocol, and I'd like to wish all of you a happy Halloween. In keeping with the spirit of the holiday, today's story is another one of the more disturbing and mentally taxing achievements on the list. This achievement took place during the summer of the Midnight Contract, and simply goes by the name of Circle X. Now, this achievement, in its entirety, was for me to sleep in my basement. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In order to understand the magnitude of this particular achievement, you need to know the backstory about the house I grew up in. Now, I'm going to start this video off with a claim. My childhood home was haunted. To the fullest extent of my knowledge, everything I'm about to say is completely and 100% true. It's certain that smaller details have been mixed up. It's totally possible that one of the stories is fake and that the person involved was pulling my leg. However, as you're going to find out, there's a lot of things to merely be chalked up to coincidence in this particular series of events. Now, when I was very young, my mother and my stepdad and I moved into a small suburb that was only a block away from my elementary school. Now, next door to our small one-story house was a larger two-story house that had a jacuzzi in the backyard. The elderly couple who owned this house, for the purposes of this video I'm going to call them Hank and Matilda, were incredibly kind and had large families that would frequently come over for cookouts and barbecues. Unfortunately, Matilda was a chronic chain smoker and as a result had developed terminal lung cancer. It was their hope that once she died and her husband had moved out of the house, we would be the ones to buy it. The day came when Matilda passed away in the living room surrounded by her friends and loved ones, and it was soon after that that we moved next door into the bigger, better house that we had always wanted. Now, it's impossible to say how long we lived in that house before I started to pick up that certain strange things were happening. One of the most notable signs was the inexplicable smell of cigar smoke that would start and stop randomly throughout any room in the house, regardless of if the vents were on, seemingly at random. Other things would happen, things like a stationary pillow that had not moved in 20 minutes, randomly doing a revolution across the floor. There were times when I could have sworn that I saw blankets move, things like that, small occurrences where, by themselves, it would be easy enough to chalk them up to nothing. However, I'd like to tell you two of the most important stories in me coming to my conclusion that the house was haunted. Now, my mother used to get up at around 4:30 every single morning so that she could exercise before helping to get the kids off to school and going to work herself. During one morning when I believe I would have been in 7th or 8th grade, my mother was woken during the dead of night by a loud rapping on her door. Now, it was such a hard knock that she was certain that one of her kids needed her, so she got out of bed and went to the door, only to find the hall light off and no one on the other side. So she went and checked, and both of our doors were closed and we were sound asleep. So she returned to her room and got back into bed, was about to go to sleep when she checked the time. It was 4:30 in the morning, and she had forgotten to set her alarm. Now, the second story happened around me, but not necessarily to me. This story involves a guy who was my best friend all throughout middle school, and for this video I'm going to be calling him Sasquatch. Now, Sasquatch was a good guy, but he was the kind of person who would intentionally make bad decisions just to see how they played out. I confided in him. I said, look, some weird things have been going on, and I think my house might be haunted. And right off the bat, I could tell he was humoring me. He was like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds interesting. That's real cool. We were partying in the basement, Sasquatch and I. It was probably 1 o'clock in the morning, and throughout the entire night, he had just been goading fate, saying things like, if there's actually a ghost here, how about it makes itself known? Nothing? Oh, how strange. You guys all know how I recognize stereotypes in horror movies. This kid is the kid that dies first. Now, one of the most important features of my basement is the door that separates the main room from the laundry room. Now, of course, we had closed this door as Sasquatch and I bedded down at about 1 o'clock in the morning. He made a couple more jokes, we retired to the couches, and I fell asleep first. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes later when he woke me up by grabbing me by the shoulders and shouting, Ben, we have to go. So he's freaking out. I'm looking around. I don't understand what's going on. It could be anything from a home invasion to a house fire. And I just decide, okay, I'm going to follow him up, and then I guess we'll figure out what's going on when we're upstairs. Now, as we're going up the stairs, I look to my right, and I see that the laundry room door is open. We booked it up 2 flights of stairs in less than 10 seconds. I slammed the door behind me, probably waking up everybody in my house as I stared at Sasquatch, who was pretty much moments away from having a panic attack on my floor. And he just kept repeating, I should have believed you. I shouldn't have made jokes. I should have believed you. So I'm like, dude, what happened? What was going on? And he said, well, you went to sleep and I was falling asleep, and I was looking at the laundry room door. And it opened up, and someone on the other side whispered, "Hello." The amount of fear that he expressed that night goes far beyond what he could reasonably fake if he was trying to prank me. I have no doubt in my mind that whatever happened to him, he fully believed. And in conjunction with everything else that had been going on in that house, I have no doubt that it truly happened. But hey, he was asking for it. Now, one of the best aspects of all of the lists that I've completed up until this point is that they have allowed me to confront my deepest and darkest fears. Whether it's the very real fear of getting lost and potentially having to fend for myself, or the more mental fear of the unknown and the unexplained, and quite frankly, a fear of the dark. Now, by the time the Midnight Contract rolled around, these paranormal experiences have been happening to me and my family for the better part of 6 years. So it was at that point that I decided that I was going to put myself to the test. I had said that my list was a way for me to push myself and experience new things, and my basement was one of the most terrifying places I could imagine when the lights went out. Therefore, I had to have an achievement where I confronted those fears. Now, at the time, one of the most infamous internet icons was Slender Man himself. Today, it seems a little bit dated, but in its heyday, Slender Man was actually quite terrifying before it became oversaturated, made into video games, all the other nonsense that it's devolved into, like any internet meme does. Now, one of my favorite aspects of the Slender Man mythos is the Marble Hornets YouTube channel. A shaky cam, found footage series of events that chronicle a young man who is potentially being hunted or driven insane by a demon. Now, of course, I couldn't just sleep in the basement. I had to watch something that would get me on edge before I was even ready to turn out the lights. Therefore, one of the stipulations of the achievement was that I had to watch a full hour of the scariest Marble Hornets episodes I could find before I was allowed to turn out the lights. That's where the name of the achievement originated, the infamous Slender Man symbol, a circle and an X. Now, the kicker to this entire achievement is that I did this when I was completely alone in the house. I waited for a weekend when my family was going to be gone on a camping trip and told myself that no matter what, I was going to stay in that basement. I eventually found myself down in the basement watching Marble Hornets, playing Dead Space, and soon it came about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was getting ready to go to sleep. And the entirety of the basement was only lit by the light from the hallway. Nevertheless, I was able to fall asleep without incident, and more or less almost immediately. Now, the picture that I'm showing on screen is what my basement looked like the moment before I closed my eyes and went to sleep. This picture is what greeted me when I opened them, not an hour later. The massive cabinet beneath the stairs had been opened. Now, that door is solid wood. Nothing had fallen out from the inside of the closet. This was the first time I had ever seen that cabinet open of its own accord, and it happened the one night when I was alone, sleeping less than 3 feet away from it. Now, at that point, I started to panic. Mentally and physically and emotionally, I just wanted to get out of the basement, but I was struck by the horrific realization that it didn't matter. Because even if I went upstairs, I was still alone, and I was still in that house. So I did the only logical thing. I rolled over, and I went back to sleep. This is Ben Fisk for the Darkfall Protocol, signing off.